Hello, everyone. I hope you are uncommonly well and doing well in spite of your circumstances and that you have great plans for its improvement. Welcome to Homemakers Radio, and if you're new here, please click the link in the description on the channel and go to the page on which I have embedded this broadcast so that you can see a description and some of the other things around the manse. And so anyone who needs something to listen to can come and turn it on and go about your business. You can walk, you can rest, and you can do any kind of work at home. We have dappled sunlight coming in this evening. I have been trying to get here since early in the day and have a lot of other things come up. So I'm just hoping that everything will work and that I can stay here long enough to put a broadcast on for you. Now, I think it's very important before you begin your homemaking for you to take care of yourself. And a cheerful apron and also a cheerful appearance will help you more than anything. And it also get yourself a serious cup of tea or whatever you like and a list, and it gives your mind the impression that you mean business and that this is serious. So it's very helpful to take care of those things first thing, and it makes you feel like that you can accomplish something. Now, I remember back in the day, even studying the scriptural references to women being keepers of the home, and it said that the word of God be not blasphemed. And even back in the 50s, it was considered quite bad form for a woman to neglect her home or neglect the children, neglect their spiritual training and their education and their clothing and their food, because it was considered a blight on their religion or on the family or on the name, or it was all part of everything. It brings down in other people's opinion the dignity of the home. And we are going to have to work hard to bring that back and to bring back that dignity and not have a poor reflection on the family or the family name. One thing about staying home is that you can slow down a little bit. And so I hope you'll come along with me and leave the world behind for a little bit. I was thinking the other day how can you leave the world behind when it replays, all the media replays itself in your mind over and over. So I got to thinking today, you've got to be your own scientist at home. And science is where you try something over and over till you get the same results, or if you don't get good results, you go and try something else. And so I noticed that the exercise lessons that I do online, the videos that I watch when I try to exercise for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, during those times after the exercise program is over, I'm thinking, I didn't think for 15 minutes or worry for 15 minutes about what that old world was doing. So experiment a little, whether it's an art class you're taking or playing music or going for a walk or reading. Sometimes our minds can be so full of this media and it replays itself over and over that even when we read a book, we don't see the writing after a while. Stress is so bad. And so I came here last time and told you to take intermittent fast from stress. Give it 5 minutes every now and then where you say, I'm not going to think about what's going on in the world. I'm just going to have my serious cup of tea and make a list, or do something that is very fulfilling, some interest that you have. So let's put the world away for a little while, if you can. And I suggest that you practice it. Just every hour, stop and take 5 minutes out and do something that has nothing to do with the media. Try not to think about it. Just distract yourself for 5 minutes with something at home. And also, there's beauty in slowing down. It can help a lot if you will not be in a hurry. And I realize homemaking, unfortunately, a lot of women approach it the way they were trained at school or the way they were trained at work or college. And that is, you get an assignment and you just get it done. And you don't put much thought into it or much heart or spirituality into it. Whereas home has to be different. You need to fold things slowly. You need to clean out a drawer slowly. Think about what you're doing. And of course, you will be subjected to some kind of ridicule. Somebody will say something like, well, what's the big deal? Just, clean it out, put it back, and shut the drawer. But we need to be more thoughtful and slow down a little bit on just about everything. It's like when I was reading to you out of the Jane Austen Diet by Brian Kozlowski, where he said in a chapter that their walking was so different. To go out for a walk was not like dressing up in sports clothes and vigorously walking just to do the exercise. But they were taking in a whole lot of things around them, the sights and the smells and the sounds, and observing a lot of things. And there was the atmospheric condition, which is why I read to you out of Eric Sloane's weather book, because the home is going to have an atmospheric condition that you won't detect sometimes when you're in an institution, and you may be kind of bewildered by it. And you may think, oh, there must be something wrong with me, but it could be that it's many different things that you're picking up and had not, and it's quite frightening. We had a little kitten once years ago, and it was born in the winter, and so we were living up north, and it was just terrible outside and snow everywhere, so we didn't let it out. And when spring came, and the grass was so pretty, and this beautiful warm breeze was out, we let this kitten out, and the kitten was frightened of everything, even though it was a beautiful day. And when every movement, a leaf would float across the lawn, or the grass would move, and it would just be frightened. Well, that's kind of the way it is if you've been kind of cooped up in institutions, and now you're home, and you're a homemaker. You've got to make your own schedule. You determine how the day is going to go. It can be quite frightening when you sense maybe some air pressure or a mood, or the afternoon sun changes, or the light changes, or just the feeling, the darkness, things like that, which you wouldn't if you were in an institution all day long. Probably that's all blotted out, all that atmospheric stuff. So that's why I'm going to read to you out of that. So slowing down means that whatever you think you have to do out there, and to separate ourselves for a while from the world, think about things that you'd like to do that's out there that you could possibly do by yourself at home. And that's one reason why I read to you out of these books. And so I'm going to start now and tell you that when the world settles down, it may not. But if you have learned anything in the last couple of years about what you can do at home, when the world settles down, observe how you get caught up back in the commercial world and get caught back up in that old world, and its rushing around, and its tension, and its rules. And don't forget the things that you did while you weren't able to get out that settled you down. The art class you took, the correspondence you took up with a friend, the lessons you learned when you joined online classes, the exercises, the long walks, the lovely conversations that you had, and the sewing, and the housework, and all the interest you had in decorating. And a lot of people have objected to this idea of decorating, but it isn't anything except taking what you have. We think of the basics, the lamp, and the rug, and the little chair, and the table, and the dishes, and just these basic, simple things. Those are furnishings, but furnishings are also your decor, and taking care of them and arranging them is very simple, and you can do it in a pleasing way, or you can do it in not so pleasing way, and you don't have to, quote, decorate. You just take what you have and make it nice. Make it look nice. So don't let the world, the commercial world, dictate to you and dictate what you'll do on certain days. And they've done it over the years. I can remember being pulled about day after day at different things that needed to be done out there. And I'm so happy, in a way, to be in this current era because I don't have to do it that way anymore. But I want to read to you a little verse that talks about, in a way, all of us and how, in a way, we suffer from self-doubt and from maybe people who don't have any confidence in what we're doing at home or in being homemakers or homeschoolers. And I wanted to reassure you that although you might be, someone might say something rather cross to you or rather pointed, and it can bother you for a long time. And our young people need to be taught this too. It says, after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. I did a couple of videos on that word establish. If you can find them, just look for that word because I think it's in the title. And when something is established, it means that it's something that is firmly there. And then listen to this. To him be the dominion forever and ever. And to him be the dominion. When we look at how the world runs us and how the media gets our minds going and maybe we can't sleep at night, they're having dominion over us. It says to him be the glory and the dominion. So he's supposed to have dominion over us. And so keep Christ on your mind and pray always for everything that you're having any kind of difficulty in doing. I love it that it said he will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. Sometimes things people say can knock you over pretty badly, and especially people that you thought were supposed to be nice to you. And so to start out with now and continue on the homemaking, I don't actually cover sewing very much, but I wanted to share with you some things that I have been doing. And you notice this dappled sunlight coming in here, so I hope it's not going to alter what I'm going to show you. But I go through catalogs and magazines, and I find pictures. And this one here is of a plaid shawl, and I often cut them out, and I've got just a bunch of them in a box. And so I've been taking them out and then clipping a piece of fabric off of a bigger piece that I have and putting it together with the picture to show my sewing idea to myself. And that way, and I'll put it back, and that way it's not sitting on the fabric, which is usually folded and there's a couple of yards there, and not getting my attention. And that was just an idea. Now I noticed in the catalog that that was quite expensive, but I think I probably make that. If not, it just gives me an idea. And here's another one. It's a dress idea, and I just clipped a piece of fabric and taped it on there. And I'll just keep these things together in my little box by my sewing machine and be reminded of what I'd like to do. Now this is a picture of a tote. It's a bag, and it looks like lace, but it is vinyl that has a lace print on it. And I remembered back in the olden days, one of the first Victoria magazines that came out had a picture of one of these, and it was called the Nature Bag. And the idea was that back in the late 1980s, people were becoming more interested in going outside and going on nature walks, and the homeschoolers had a nature studies course book for their children, and it was a part of the curriculum, and it was called Nature Studies. And so the idea to have a waterproof bag or box or basket or something always intrigued me, and I saved that picture. Well, recently I went and got some vinyl, and it's just the stuff they use on tablecloths, you know, when they make when they cover tables for weddings and other things, and it's vinyl. and or plastic, I'm not sure, but it has a lace print on it. So I taped it to this picture and to remind me I'd still want to make one of those bags. And in the magazine, as I recall, that bag was quite expensive. It was some kind of a designer bag, and I think this is going to cost me just $1 or so. But anyway, I have my little stack here, and I'll stick it by my... and other people have other things. They have little idea boards where they can just pin these on a little cork board just behind their sewing machine or in their sewing room or somewhere that they can, where they can see it and keep it in mind. So I hope that while you are listening today, you're getting a few things done. Now, I remembered while I was working today, trying to get everything settled down and straightened out, that there were several people in the past when I was growing up that were, I guess, semi-famous or something, that created success for themselves in a time when they weren't able to do the things they really wanted. For example, and this is the principle that I'm trying to say here, is create a substitute, create another way out, create something else. And I'm thinking of particularly of fashion. I am thinking of people that could not find clothes to wear back in the 1960s when the clothing got so inadequate, and women who were older, or just women who didn't like the fashion, were almost forced to go along with it, but they managed to substitute and create their own fashion by being able to sew. And when something's not available, you just learn how to substitute for it. And I thinking particularly of an author back in the 1960s, that she wanted to write really nice stories, and the 60s was dominated by the media, who promoted a lifestyle that she didn't agree with, and so her books never, people wouldn't buy them because in general they said, well, this isn't reality. And so she decided to go back into history and go into the Regency era and write novels about the castles and the knights and the horses and things like that. They always had a happy ending, and there was nothing in there that you couldn't read or show to your children. And so she just figured out a different way out. And so what about things that maybe you would like to do, or anybody would like to do, when people aren't responding? And so I read about a preacher's wife back, and somebody sent me a book from a lady that had written in Canada, and she had written a book about being a preacher's wife and having back in the 1940s, I think it was, and she'd gotten they had moved to a little place that had already was well established as far as people having their friends and their relatives, and so she felt quite left out, and they weren't letting her be part of it. So she just decided that she would start something at home for herself, and she started a diary. She wrote stories, and she began to sew, and she sewed little quilts for babies and things like that, and she had her own life. She just created her own way because she knew she wasn't going to break in to the friendships that had already been formed for so many years. And she had many friends, and so that no matter where she went, wherever they moved, she always had these friends that she had connected with through many things that she did. I also wanted to warn you about the demands on your time. You need to shorten the demands on your time at home from outside forces. Now, if a woman who was in a commercial job, who was getting a paycheck for what she did, if she was working outside of the home and someone wanted her to do something, she would say, I have to work. And or they want her to volunteer for something, she would say, well, I have to work on that day. And so for some reason, homemakers are so subjected to these distractions, and they think that they should do something voluntarily. But let me just warn you that your volunteer work is in your home. Your volunteer work, you're volunteering because, of course, we know volunteer work doesn't get paid. But in a way, you do. I don't want to get into that, but I think people can think of many ways in which you benefit, and even financially, from being at home. But this is your volunteer work, and better to volunteer extra time for your children than for someone else's. And if people need help, it's possible they can bring their need to you in your home, or that you could help them in some other way, and so that it wouldn't be so time consuming. But I got to thinking about the women who would say, well, I have to work. So what you can do if people start pestering you for your time. Now, volunteer work should be volunteer. It should not be someone pressuring you, and it should not be you feeling guilty, but it be something you genuinely want to do. And if you make your list, and you look very important, you have a pen and everything, and somebody's saying, and you have a pen and a clipboard and everything, and someone's saying, oh boy, I wish you would get involved in this volunteer work. You look at your schedule and you say, I can't fit it in, I have to work. Because too many times, and I've seen this in the past, women whose children are now grown and gone regret that they spent so much time in volunteering to help other people when they needed to be helping their own. So make sure that you don't make that mistake. And it doesn't mean that you can't help other people, but you know what a good way to help other people is? To live that beautiful home life, to live that beautiful example at home. That is the best way to help, because then you teach them to help themselves by becoming homemakers. You teach them to be independent of the world. And so also, I wanted to read out of this Cottage Core book because it's about doing things by yourself. Now, you can do this with your family, or you can do this with a group. If you could get a group together, that would be fun, or you can find different ways of connecting with other people over it. But what I liked about it was that those of you who live alone, and I realize I'm talking to people that have large families, young families, or our grandmothers or great-grandmothers, but this is for everybody. And this book, something like this book, is for everybody. It can suit everyone. But here's something you can do by yourself. And I think basically, if you're at home, you can do more for other people by doing things for yourself and by yourself, because you show them that wonderful example. And so this is the page of the summer living when they're around their growing season, and this lady has put together a number of unique ideas for putting a plant in. And she has here an old pair of boots. Well, sometimes our boots come apart and you never want to throw them away, but no one wants them. So she's just filled them with soil and put a plant in them. And then she has an old bucket. She has an old lunch pail. And she has a helmet for a hanging plant. That's cute. And tires. And she has an old backpack. And so she has all kinds of ideas. And I think that any of you could write a book like this using your own ideas. Or just take a art journal and start your own ideas and put that in there. So there's so much you can do. And so now I hardly throw anything away. If I have a broken teacup, that can be a little bit of garden decor. Put a little tiny plant in that. I'll just be looking at things in a different way. I'm not sure a worn out frying pan with a hole in it, I'm not sure what I could do with that. But some people would use something like that for something. So I put that out on the giveaway table. So after I've done my reading for you today, I will go into handling other people. And all the phrases that we can use from the old books and to make it a little bit of fun. So I'm going to read a little bit out of Eric Sloane's weather book because it can apply to you at home. And if you want to read, go onto my playlist and go back and listen to some of the other broadcasts, you'll catch up with what I've been talking about. And in this book, he's talking about the chapter on atmosphere. Atmosphere, and the reason that I got interested in it, because I would get home from church on Sunday and I'd get this creepy house feeling. I couldn't figure it out. And then I got to reading some of Jane Austen's diet, which isn't really a diet, it's a lifestyle. It was the fresh air and opening up the house and letting it air out after it had rained, because there's negative ions, which means, I believe, comes from the word iron, and just the different things you can do in your home to chase away this weirdness that you don't feel anywhere else, but the home is stuffy, so it's stuffy home syndrome, I called it. But then I got into this. This was a book we bought as extra material for homeschool, and you don't have to use it as an assignment, but I think you should read it. Just read the way to get people interested in books is to read them a paragraph out of it. And then after that, they'll read the rest of it themselves. So he had written this. He had put a poem in here that everyone was familiar at the time in the 1940s, and was explaining it. So I'm going to read about the air, the atmospheric condition, and the air. All these observations are the kind that make being weather-wise a pleasure. When you know what they mean, they cease to be folklore, weather prophecies, and become science. For example, almost everyone has heard that when the leaves show their backs, rain is on the way, and has probably thought that, if this be true, leaves of trees just naturally curl upward before a storm. Any student can explain that leaves are designed to grow in a pattern according to the prevailing good weather wind. Therefore, a non-prevailing or stormy wind turns them over. It's that simple. And we've all seen trees. I've got one in my backyard that I'm sure has been there 50 years, and it's leaning, but it was planted during a weather condition that persisted, and the wind blew in a certain direction and the tree just bent that way, and it's strong and it hasn't fallen down. But that's what happens. Today, when we build a house, we usually regard the land plot as flat, and we place our house ornamentally rather than meteorologically. The old houses were more often placed with great consideration for prevailing winds and sun exposure. A small hill or a grove of trees was not regarded only decoratively, as it is today, but as an atmospheric mechanism that ensured the working of fireplaces, the elimination of mildew, freedom from snowdrifts, and protection from unfavorable winds. This is quite a piece of information here. And so houses were built with a regard for the atmosphere. And I did read that to you before and posted a picture, a drawing that he had here. And I'll read a little bit more. Here. Moods can be changed by atmospheric changes, and it is wise to take this into consideration. The actions of drunken people are often overlooked and forgiven, but people can be drunk with humidity or heat too. Many people even become extremely irritable in dry warmth. It is well known that European trial courts frequently take heed of arguments that occurred during the weather depression caused by the strange dry warmth or winds. It is definitely established in medical and criminal reports that heat induces anger and that more crimes are committed during hot weather than in cold weather. Now, I was reading about the Americans. In Wise, it says, the American Indians, who observed weather to a remarkable degree, knew well the effects of humidity on man. And, quote, the storm God gives courage to the red man, they said, and not a move during battle was made without a bit of weather-wise planning. And so when we are aware of the effect of weather on our moods, then we are more able to control it. The Bible talks about self-control. We're not supposed to have sudden outbursts of anger, and you're going to have people around you that do that because they're just not aware, and they need learning. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time reading from the Jane Austen diet because of the time that we need to spend alone, away from people that irritate us or any kind of, but it's not just people. When you think of the news media, think of how stiff you feel and how upset you feel by a dose of media. And there are people who say that they did away with it for a couple of weeks and they just thought they were living in the most beautiful world there ever was and just living a beautiful life, and then one day they didn't even read the news, but somebody told them something from the news, and he just felt the grip on his throat. He just felt like someone had gripped him on the throat. That's how tense it is. So that is one of the main things you're going to have to really keep away from your home. You don't really need a television or a radio going all the time. You don't really need it at all. I haven't seen a pretty television in years. I don't think that would go with the decor very well, but you have your internet and you have your phone. I mean, you don't need to have that broadcast into your home on a big screen. And so if you keep that out of your life, you just really don't need it. They're not going to help you get your kitchen cleaned up and get your meals prepared. They're not going to help you do all those things that are bothering you in your home. They're just going to make you tense. So speaking of tense, and there will be those, that will cause tension in your life. And so I'm going to read from Brian Kozlowski's on the mind-body connection, an interval of meditation. And, today people feel that when they're upset about something, they need to talk about it, which is nice. But in Jane Austen's day, when someone gave them a hard time or their social life was unpleasant, they wanted to retreat for a little while and be quiet. And this is what we need. An interval of meditation. Sometimes Austen heroines have to go off the mental grid to process those shocking articles of news that seem to pummel them daily. The news that Lydia had run off with Wickham, and I always remember Elizabeth was asked by Mr. Darcy about her poor sister Lydia and what bad news that was, and she said, "We're enduring it as best we can." And that is just a beautiful statement that we can use when we come to using sayings with these people that are always aggravating. So remember that. We are enduring it as best we can, and you don't have to give them any details. And if they've heard that one of your sisters has run off with someone and it hasn't been a pleasant thing for your family and it was most disappointing, people will ask, well, have you heard from her? What's going on there? And they want to find out how things turned out, And one of the best answers I've ever heard is, well, that's in God's hands and He's working it out. Everything is working it out. And you don't have to give them the sad details. You don't have to tell them everything. So, every life is guaranteed its fair share of mental shakeups. And we need to know that. Life is part good and part bad, and we will have maybe people in our family that will do extremely disappointing things in spite of our best efforts. Other people and other forces and other influences are able to lure them away into false beliefs, false health, false careers, false relationships, and we grieve over them, don't we? Wasn't there a song in church we used to sing about how when someone we love goes astray, our hearts grieve. I'll see if I can find that for you and post it. And when they come, heroines throughout Austin world calm back down with the Regency version of meditation. The Bible talks about meditation. I believe it was the psalmist David who said, I will meditate on your word day and night. And meditation is not the same as reading something. It's taking it word by word and dwelling on it, chewing on it, and thinking about it again and again. Emma, Anne, Eleanor, and Lizzie all practice it, frequently needing mental take-fives, quick retreats to somewhere quiet where their brains can ask a few therapeutic questions like, what just happened? How do I feel about it? And how am I going to respond? An interval of meditation was the best corrective. A few minutes of quiet solitude in her bedroom allows Lizzie to wrap her mind around the weirdness of Charlotte marrying Mr. Collins. Emma likewise depends on separating herself now and then for the relief of quiet reflection, especially after Mr. Elton's proposal. Sure, these meditations might look a bit amateurish for some of us that are accustomed to viewing them as complicated combo of heavy breathing, brass bells, and deep chants. But Austen never knew meditation in these Eastern mystic terms. For her, the real magic of meditation lay in simply experiencing the power of delightful quiet. Quiet is so important because too much commotion can give you brain trauma, I think. And when you have brain trauma, you can't concentrate on anything. You don't know who you are. You can't. You don't feel settled, and you feel uncertain and lacking in confidence. Silence, stillness, and quiet. Most of us don't fully experience it today unless we fall asleep. But even then, if you don't prepare yourself for good sleep, you can sleep in a troubled way and never really get any rest. So it's very important to start early, getting ready to retire for the evening, and slow down, quiet down. Don't start something controversial. And remember the last time I told you about these people that'll tell you something disturbing just before you're going to fall asleep. The quietness of it does me good, she wrote her sister in 1813, describing her enjoyment of a few moments of snug solitude in the front drawing room, with the front drawing room all to myself. Her novels are arranged accordingly. Nobody functions well without frequent doses of suitable quietness. So I think that is something why I tell you. The reason I tell you that is something that you can do by slowing down, quietly doing something, quietly putting things away. I'm going to read a little bit more from Wives and Daughters, just another page here. And then we'll go to the people part. I try to do the last 15 minutes on that. So Molly has been invited to the Hamleys, where she's had dinner with them, and after dinner, during dinner, Mr. Hamley gets to talking and starts peeling his orange. And he turns to Molly and says, "Tomorrow you will do this for me, Miss Gibson." "Shall I? I'll do it today if you like, sir." "No, today I shall treat you as a visitor, with all proper ceremony. Tomorrow I shall send you on errands and call you by your Christian name." "I should like that," said Molly. "I was wanting to call you something less formal than Miss Gibson," said Mrs. Hamley. "My name's Molly. It is an old-fashioned name, and I was christened Mary, but Papa likes Molly." That's right. Keep to the good old fashions, my dear. Well, I must say I think Mary is prettier than Molly, and quite as old a name, too," said Mrs. Hamley. "I think it was," said Molly, lowering her voice and dropping her eyes, "because Mamma was Mary, and I was called Molly while she lived." So, just these little bits of conversation are good to understand when people had just normal conversation without an agenda that didn't have a deeper meaning or anything like that. It was disturbing enough to talk about how you got your name and how your mother died, and you had a different name while she lived. And so, but I'm always interested in the conversation because I remember some of it when I was growing up, and people weren't always talking about the media or about the current events or social problems. Not always. Sometimes it was about their little lives around their estate or their home. Now, one thing I would like to talk about today is disappointment with people, and to be gentle with those who are erring, because maybe they just need a good airing. So that's airing, E-R-R-I-N-G, versus airing, A-I-R-I-N-G. We talked about that in the Eric Sloan Weather book on how air, an atmospheric condition, can affect a person's mood. But we are told in the Bible to control our moods, and so that would overcome any kind of atmospheric condition. But you feel a little twinge of something, maybe a little down feeling, or maybe kind of sinking into melancholy or something sad, and then we're reminded that we do have the opportunity to overcome it. But it is good to know about the weather and the atmospheric condition. But be gentle to the erring one. They are on a mental frequency that is taking their minds away. And they often do not, as like Christ say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They are on a trip, as they used to say. They're on a mental trip where something has got their minds, and they will follow that for a while, and you'll think, what are you talking about? That's not true. That's not sound. But who knows? Sometimes they are on some kind of pharmaceutical or substance, and they don't know what they're saying. It's like they've lost their minds, and they can get into false philosophies, false teaching, many false things, and so their hearts have been taken away. And we need to be gentle with them, so that when they recover from this, the Bible talks about people recovering from this sort of thing. They do. When they recover from this, they remember your gentle ways, and they can go home. So also notice that a person that aggravates someone at home, actually we might show more grace at home, and they get away with it. Maybe we're just quiet, we ignore it, and we let them have their blow-ups and fits and things like that. I don't know what goes on in everybody's home, and I have observed some people that do treat their families pretty badly. But don't ever think, if you're a mother at home and you have someone like that, maybe not your own child, but just someone in your life like that, don't ever think they're only doing it to you, because what they get away with at your home, they don't get away with in public. Someone else will rise up and discipline them in a harsher way. Now, I wanted to go back to people that accuse you of escapism, and the fun that I have been having with this lately. No one has accused me of that, but I can remember back in the day when I was told I was living in a dream world, because no one would ever say you need to get a job outside of the home and go to work and go along with this system, and no one would ever say that. They would just make me doubt my mind by saying you're living in a dream world. And so I collected some sayings, and I decided, and to be accused of escapism, that was common. I like to deny the accusation of living in a dream world. or you're just living inside of old novels, or you're just living in a Victorian world, because someone might have decorated their house and with their Victorian antiques that they got from their great grandmother, so they're mocked and said that they are escaping and they are living in a dream world. And so I like to deny it by affirming it with quotes from these old novels. I don't know what you would call that. What is that called? How do you know that I was asked one time, how do you know that the way you are living is going to work out? I mean, how do you know what's going to happen if you don't go and get a degree and this and that, and you don't go to work for this corporation? How do you know? And so here's the quote. Well, I went into the surgery and I looked it up. I don't see anything escapist about that. Well, that's a quote from Wives and Daughters. When Hyacinth was going to look up a surgical word. And the other thing is, how can you stand to live like this? You could have so much more. Say, I'm enduring it as best I can. That's from Pride and Prejudice. And then maybe things go a little bit wrong, and your husband, his circumstances are reduced, or he has to transplant, or loses his job and has to change careers, and someone is there right away saying, "Well, are you going to get a job somewhere?" You can say, "How are you going to manage?" And I like this quote by Molly. It's rather like tooth drawing, I suppose, but it will go away after a while. I'm trying to think. And Mr. Gibson asked Molly, "How shall you bear it?" And so you can use that when someone expresses extreme concern over you. I'm concerned about you. You're not out there, and you're a homemaker. How are you going to manage? I'm concerned. Okay, Mr. Gibson said to Molly, "How shall you bear it?" You can say, "How shall you bear it?" And then I liked a quote here that might be quite handy, and that is when Molly had been sharp with her father, and she'd accused him of making a bunch of arrangements behind her back and sending her away to Mrs. Hamley's so he could go and do something without her approval. And she was so upset with herself for being angry with her father. And she went to Mrs. Hamley and she cried on her shoulders. And she says, I've been so unkind to Papa. And Mrs. Hamley patted her on the shoulder and she said, there, you can make all right tomorrow. So I love these quotes, and if I find any more, I'll just write them down and use them as part of a series of quotes that I can use on people who accuse me of living inside of old novels. And I can say, "Oh no, it's not what you think it is," and quote something from the old novel. I think it would drive them wild. But what do we live for except to make sport of our neighbors? So, ladies, I hope that let me just check my notes and make sure that I have covered everything here. And that is, I've often told you to, when you get up in the morning, just to orient yourself to take a walk through the house, just kind of notice things that need to be done and get acquainted with your home in the morning. And then at night, you need to go through and get ready for the evening. And if you are living alone, this can be a particular challenge, because if you're living alone, there's a temptation not to mess with anything, just not to make your bed, not to get ready, and from day to day, you're not going to have anybody there or see anybody. Maybe you don't even have any relatives. But I think in the name of human dignity, you ought to, and take care of yourself, and at least picture yourself as part of a family, and get yourself cleaned up because of the human dignity, because you're a human being, fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and try to show that to yourself and prove that to yourself, and see how show the difference. I used to like to tell ladies when I had classes in the old days, do an experiment, and one day just don't even bother with your appearance in the morning and walk around in your sleeping clothes or your sweats or whatever, and kind of observe everybody's mood. Or you might say nothing special happened, no one lost their temper, nothing. But then the next day, get up and have a complete change, and see if you are lifted up by it. See if your day improves. See what kind of feelings you have after that, and do your own homework. So ladies, I hope that you will be sound in mind and healthy in body, and that you'll keep close to Christ. Keep praying for the members of your family. We can pray for all this stuff in the world that the media comes out. And I've looked back at some of the things I've prayed for over the years that concerned me, that came out through the media, and could not see that it had made any difference, but praying for my family and my home. And no one else. Who's going to pray for your husband? Who's going to pray for your children? Who's going to pray for you? So be sure to focus your prayers on the needs of the people in your own realm, the people that you're responsible for. So ladies, I hope you have a wonderful day, and that while you were listening, you got a few things done, and that you slowed down, and that you will keep your mind free of the pollution of the media. Somebody's going to tell you what, you're not going to miss out on anything, and your life is not going to stop. But you might want to experiment with that too, and do with that. Find some music to listen to. Sometimes you can have listen to LibriVox online, which is a public domain reading where people read things, and you can listen to wives and daughters on that, and you can listen to other things, or you could just sing, and you can learn to play something, play a piano, play an instrument, and occupy your mind that way, and do everything you can to be as stable as you can, and to bring out your best and develop your own skills and talents. And so, until I find something else to talk about, I'll just see you next time. Bye.